You're welcome back. Many thanks for staying with us. There's renewed pressure on government to back down on its decision to mine bauxite in the Etua forest. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta yesterday told Parliament that Ghana stands to obtain some $2 billion in infrastructure from a deal that will see bauxite from the Nyinahin reserves handed to a Chinese company. The Etua forest is suspected to be that place. Now, even before the exploitation of that reserve, the coalition of NGOs against mining in Etua forest has been protesting today. Here is the technical economic advisor at the office of the Vice President, Dr. Gideon Boako, making a case for this arrangement.
Out of that China trip, some 17 billion, 15 billion.
Yeah.
You remember that? There's the money coming. So those discussions were held. Some amount of money was mentioned, but they were in different components. One tranche of it was this AGI and the China CNBM, 2 billion for one district, one factory. And about 2 or 3 months ago, the CNBM was in Ghana, signed a pact with AGM. So 2 billion component of that 15 billion the Vice President talked about from China is that one. Right. Then this Sino-Hydro one is another 2 billion component of the 15 billion that the Vice President talked about when we came from China. And linked to this Sino-Hydro, the Sino-Hydro is predicated on our bauxite. So what is going to happen is that this is not loan. Remember when we came from China, we said that the deal we have gone to have from China is not going to be a loan. It's not going to add to our debt stock. It's not going to affect our fiscals. It's not going to increase our debt to GDP ratio. At the time, the minority didn't understand. They said, oh, it is a lie. Where can you get money from 2 billion, 15 billion? It is not a loan. We said it is not going to be a loan. Today, it has been laid bare in Parliament, and it is not going to be a loan. Next week, it's going to go to Parliament. Parliament will approve it. It's not going to be a loan. What is happening is that this 2 billion is infrastructure for bauxite barter arrangement. Now, we have abundant mineral resources in the form of bauxite. So what the government of Ghana is doing is more or less like a forward sale of the bauxite. We are saying that we have these resources. Bring 2 billion. Do $2 billion, do the kind of infrastructure that we want you to do. Listen very carefully. It is not infrastructure that you have determined to do for us. It is infrastructure that we want to do. It is infrastructure that we have costed. So all the projects and the roads Finance Minister mentioned today, the cost on them are costs that government of Ghana have put together through our ministry and experts there. And so we say that if you're going to construct the Lejokuku-Lekma road, this is how much it's going to cost. Come and construct it for us. But it's going to be an EPC contract arrangement. EPC in the sense that there's engineering, procurement and construction. So they will come and do the construction. But Ghana has 30% stake, local content stake in that. And then the raw material they use like cement, iron rods will have to be bought from Ghana. Labor will have to be Ghanaians and all of that. So they do these projects for us. This is for a period of 3 years. We are not going to pay them anything now until the 3-year period moratorium has elapsed and they are done with all the projects. When they are done, the arrangement is that by the time they are done, we would have set up a bauxite mining company in Ghana. And would have also set up a bauxite refinery in Ghana. So what government of Ghana has done is that it is vesting all our bauxite proceeds in a company that we call Ghana Integrated Bauxite and Aluminium Development Authority, GEBADA. So if you take the other paper in Parliament today, it was in the parliamentary proceedings that GEBADA is laid in Parliament today, and Parliament is going to pass GEBADA before it rises. So when Parliament passes GEBADA next week or so before it rises, that GEBADA company becomes a government holding company on behalf of the government of Ghana, which will then own the bauxite proceeds. So the bauxite resource then becomes for the whole Ghanaians and not for one private company called Estin Quebec that is related to former Vice President Mahama also. But the entirety of Ghanaians will own that bauxite company. Then they will enter into a joint venture agreement with an
That is the technical economic advisor at the office of the Vice President, Mr. Boako, there speaking. But spokesperson for the coalition of NGOs against mining in Etua is Darabo. So he wants government to abandon any thought of mining in Etua.
To get started, government needs to clearly and completely stop making any references of Etua as an area to exploit bauxite. When we do that, then the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, together with the Forestry Commission and all stakeholders, can come together and cut a pathway for the national park. As I speak to you,
So that is Daryl speaking earlier. Daryl joins me in the studio now. Daryl, you're welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
I'll have you respond directly to the concerns or to the arguments being advanced by Dr. Bwako there. You heard him say very nice things about this arrangement that we have with the Chinese. Yeah. And it does make a lot of sense to me. Does it not make sense to you?
Definitely, it does make a lot of sense. And I think we need to say that we have never been against plans to develop bauxite in this country. I mean, like he said, Ghana has got so much reserves of bauxite in this country. Guinea, which has got the largest deposit of bauxite, has about 1 billion tons of bauxite. And then the second largest place is Atiwa, which is about 180 million tons. So definitely, we have so many reserves. And also, even before this, we know that there has been bauxite mining going on in Awaso for about 78 years now. So obviously, Ghana has got so many resources in terms of bauxite to exploit. And as a coalition, I need to say we are not against the bauxite agenda. We see prospects in there, but a major concern is the specific targeting of Atiwa Forest Reserve. As you know, and we have already indicated, this forest reserve is very unique. It's not like any other forest reserves. You said, okay, let's just sell it off. Let's just give it away. Let's cut down the trees. The forest is a source of water for about 2.5 million people in Accra. And aside that, there are several MMDAs right around the forest, about 7 of them, whose water treatment systems sit on rivers that are coming from this forest reserve. And once you touch it, it means that you are going to touch something very critical, and that is water. And I need to make people understand that bauxite extraction is one of the most destructive processes. I mean, the government can talk about the semantics of the sustainable mechanisms. I'm telling you, there's nothing like sustainable mechanism for bauxite. All that he's talking about, we're going to leverage and all of that. Yes, we're getting the roads, but at what cost? I'm telling you, if you do a calculation of how much they're even going to have access to the bauxite in Atiwa, which is about 180 million tons. I mean, estimates we have done, through an economic analysis we have also done, we realize that, I mean, the maximum number of years they can take this bauxite is about 30 years. And then it is done. Then what next? Awaso is a bauxite mining town. It's been there for 78 years. I invite you to visit the community and see how our process, our resources has been managed. So all this is about, yes, we are leveraging. After 3 years, the Chinese will come in. The concern we have is that, are you saying that because of 2 billion, and I need to say, that 2 billion, I mean, if you sell what we have in Atiwa, we might not even get about 1 billion of that. I mean, if you sell the bauxite reserves in Atiwa, and what I also need to indicate is that the bauxite reserve, according to the Minerals Commission and several other research that has been done, is also actually of low grade. So it's not to the level that if you put it on the market, if you are getting, say, $2,000 per ton for the quality grade, you will get the same. You might at most get about $900 per ton.
You said that your target is not really against mining bauxite, but you have a problem for it to be for that mining
specific target.
Atiwa.
Exactly.
Where else do you want them to look?
It's not about where else do I want them to look.
I mean, where does the organization want government to look? Because they're also talking about, bear in mind, they're also talking about raising revenue. Raising revenue to help people, to help communities, to raise the living standards of people. So if not Atiwa, where else?
Well, like I indicated, every country that wants to develop sustainably, you need to put all your resources on the table and look at the trade-offs, what you stand to lose, what you stand to gain from leveraging a part of your reserves, of your resources. Every country is developing based on the natural resources they have. And we are very much in support of the government sitting down and realizing that we can take advantage of the bauxite reserves and also use that to develop our communities, build infrastructure and all of that. But when you do that sustainable analysis, you need to critically analyze the trade-offs. And that is why we are saying that when we look at all the various areas together with bauxite deposit, we realize that if government touches Atiwa, the trade-off and the opportunity cost is going to be much greater than what revenue will get out of actually taking that bauxite. Because this is where water for 5 million people comes from. The question is, how are we going to sort that problem out?
Okay.
Right now...
Exactly the question.
Exactly.
How do we sort this problem out? How do we create that necessary balance, if you get what I mean?
So the necessary balance, as we are saying, is that we know that there's a chunk of the bauxite in a location where you will not see this impact, as we are talking about,
and that
the
is
water,
where?
and that is Yinehini.
Okay.
You realize that there has been a lot of public discussions, particularly when a concession was given to Exton Cubic, and Dr. Makun talked about it. So this particular location, like I said, has got about 1 billion tons of bauxite. So the prospects there are so much. Now, the question is, if Atiwa has 180 million tons, this same area is also the location for water for 5 million people. Is it worth the risk of touching it?
Okay.
We can still have a bauxite revenue. Like I said, if it is 2 billion, you might get just about 1/4 of it coming from Atiwa. And is it worth it, considering the water services that we get?
You have sustained this campaign for quite a while now. Have you had any responses so far?
Yes, actually, this is a very good question. And like I said, we have actually reached out to government on many occasions. And the government has been very silent and they've not responded. And actually, I need to say, yesterday, something happened yesterday. I mean, when the minister read his statement, you realize that he made a mention of the bauxite reserves in Yinehini and Kibi. But if you get a hold of the document, the minister's statement, which was published, you don't see Kibi in there. I mean, that is sending some very confusing signals. Okay,
so what you're saying is that even though the minister Ken Ofori-Atta yesterday read that there will be a bauxite exploitation in Yinehini and Kibi, you've taken the document, you don't see Kibi in there.
If you take the document,
I haven't looked at that side of the document.
If you take the document, if you look at page 38, section, I think, 180, thereabouts, where this specific aspect of the bauxite is, Kibi is clearly missing. And this is a very significant change in the narrative, as you have seen since 2017, when they always talk about bauxite, and you always find it in the document.
But do they mention Etiwa? He doesn't mention Etiwa.
He does mention. So, I mean, we are actually taking that always he has this narrative on his lips. So it's just natural that it comes out. But the document, and if there's anything we can trust, is the document. And this is where we are saying that possibly the government agrees with us in terms of all that we are saying, but is also probably at a dilemma how else to communicate this issue.
So, but I mean, since you are sustaining this campaign, you should have some sort of suggestions, ideas for government to explore. Because if you don't want, I mean, you're saying, and you've highlighted the issues about touching Etiwa. So do you have any suggestions for government as to where else to look rather than Etiwa, because then it makes it maybe easier?
But Gifty, you see, as to where else to look, there's no question about that.
There's plenty
of places. The question rather is about what is the alternate use we can put Atiwa to for us to get equally good revenue.
What are you suggesting?
And in that of course, right from the beginning, we've suggested a green development investment within that landscape. This landscape sits within a very rich agro-productive landscape where there's cocoa, there's a lot of NTFPs, there's a lot of tourism potentials, much more than you will see if you compare it to Kakum. And all of these things have been put on the table for government to have a look at it, because we are looking at sustainability, we are looking at prosperity, that also brings well-being, and that's what we want to promote within this landscape. We can't just put all our eggs in one basket. Otherwise, we are putting Ghana on an unsustainable path, and this we think the government should do everything in its power to act responsibly, not only for today, but also for tomorrow.
So those are the suggestions. Finally, on the alternative for bauxite exploitation, what have you put on the table?
On the alternatives, now, we realize that the government is really bent on going ahead with the Yinehini concession that we have never been against. But what is critical in this process is the government to pursue, ensure that there is a very critical analysis, strategic environmental assessment, and also an EIA to ensure that, I mean, like I said, bauxite is one of the most destructive extractive industries. So you need to ensure that people's safety, well-being, and also their voices, the governance aspect that relates to this issue is clearly addressed. Transparency within the process is even more critical. And that is where we realize that this government has not done so well when it comes to transparency. They've discussing MOUs, but nothing is out there for the public to comment on. They are giving out a concession. They are doing geological assessment. Who has access to this documentation? Where is the community's involvement? You might be talking to some chief, but where is the larger community participation? Okay. We're looking at inclusive development, and this is what we're asking for. Transparency within the process, even when it comes to the union concession. Okay,
Daryl, I'll say a very big thanks to you. But I think you guys have sustained this campaign quite well. You've had some artists on board as well.
Yes.
Do they really believe in this cause, or are they getting paid to push the agenda?
Yes, actually, I mean, getting this done, I mean, it's not just about approaching, but otherwise, once you are paying somebody, everybody will jump onto it. And the reason why we've even struggled with getting some of these to join it, because they realize that, well, we are only giving them the cost. Stand up for it, nothing much more to pay. So that's why we've seen people are really committed. Obwa is part of this team. We also have Ms. V supporting strongly. Sharif Agunu and Eugene, actually we took them to the landscape. They spent time in the forest for a day. They actually slept in the forest for a night. And you only need to be there, Gifty. You don't see this and you think that you are going to allow anyone to touch it. Bauxite will completely remove this forest and actually take away the soil and leave red dust and red sludge only in the landscape and its rivers. We can't afford that.
Right, right. And this is the point where I have nothing to say. Daryl, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much,
Daryl Bosu is a Deputy National Director for Arocha Ghana, an NGO, and they're pushing against exploitation of bauxite in the Etiwa Reserve. They're saying that even if you're looking elsewhere, and they're talking to government, even if you're looking elsewhere, it has to be done properly. There has to be transparency in the process. There has to be systems that actually check to make sure that it is being done in a sustainable manner.